about the glass ceiling that women face. And Paul Harrietha is going to explain that a lot more than I can, because that's his thing. That's the stuff that he does. First things I'm going to do is just quickly do a quick housekeeping thing about Zoom. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, upper right-hand corner, you have a view button. If you click that and go to gallery view, you get to see everybody in the setup. Bottom right, you'll have a reactions button. You can go thumbs up, hands up if you want to gather someone's attention. You're more than welcome to do that. If you have the barking kids and screaming dogs in the background, go to mute, mitigate the sound a little bit. And it can be entertaining, but if you have your question and you have the noise in the background, that's okay. There is a software called crisp.ai that mitigates sound in the background, so that you can have the barking dogs and screaming kids happening in the back. The chat is your next most important piece. Please put in your contact details inside this space. I'm going to just fire off some stuff that's coming in. So it has my contact details and upcoming events that are happening in this space. Important piece is the three little dots, bottom right-hand corner. Click that, hit save chat. And if you don't know where it saves on your computer, it shows a little line up above ever so temporarily. It says show in folder. And then you can go from there. And we're going to do a quick round robin of introductions of who we are. Connect Ottawa is meant to be a sharing and caring space, and it's about mentoring both to and from each other, and that's what we're about. If you need to know more about Connect Ottawa, just check inside that link that I've posted. Welcome to join Connect Ottawa. It's also in there. The other part is, remember, hit the save chat before you leave. All right. Otherwise, and if you pop out and come back in and don't have the chat, I'm more than glad to provide that for you. And so I'm going to go ahead and go around the room and say, hey, introduce yourself, give us a short blurb of what you are, where you are, and what you're all about. And Jackie Dong, you're up, sir.
Thanks, Bernie. Hi, everyone. So my name's Jackie. I am currently with Altitude Gym out in Canada, just outside of Ottawa here. And my current role is as a supervisor, but I'm moving into the campus director role, so helping enhance children's lives through education in fitness, as well in the focus of rock climbing.
Thank you, Jackie. Brenda. That evil mute button.
Sorry. My name is Brenda Williams. I'm the Executive Director for New Life Projects Incorporation. It's a non-profit organization here in Ottawa, and we work with women and youth, and we also have a social enterprise. So we have a boutique which also presently we have Christmas decorations, gifts, and ideas and everything for Christmas. We use it as a fundraiser, and we do have also a translation section. So if you're looking for your documents to be translated, and we do French tutoring as well. So it's nice meeting you, all of you.
Thank you, Brenda. Danielle.
Hi, my name is Danielle, and I'm at a law firm downtown, NBC Law. And currently I am a law clerk, and I'm kind of slowly but surely making my way through university. And hopefully one day I'll be able to call myself a lawyer. So you can like me for now.
No problem, Danielle. Anna, over to you.
Her sound isn't working.
Fair enough, Anna. Sorry. I thought you really sorted that out. Siobhan.
Hi, nice to be here again. Looking forward to Paul's presentation. Siobhan Fitzpatrick of the Networking Hub, founder and CEO. I help B2B SMEs get more return on their investment by helping them to network for success. I'm based in Dublin, and we work with global businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie.
Tanya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Hewitt. I come from the unceded territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nations. Most people recognize this as Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I would like to help businesses become healthier. A lot of people think that work is just a drudgery, and they look forward to weekends, vacations, and retirement. But actually work can be more fulfilling and engaging. And if we can start this transition after this great resignation, we can get through to much healthier workplaces, to get businesses focused on being productive societal contributors overall.
Thank you, Tanya. Sorry. The board keeps moving around and going, oh no, I've lost people. Eva, you're next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eva Elgerson. I work for Eckler. I'm a pension actuary and a benefit actuary. So I'm very involved in having women in businesses, workplace that are safe for women. So I'm very looking forward to these discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, Eva. Linda.
Hello, everyone. I'm rather new to this group, although I know some of the people here. Nice to have you back. It's Linda Babulik. I'm a very zesty executive life coach, and I'm here to help you have more zest in your life. We're going to squeeze the juice out of it and enjoy it a little more.
Thank you, Linda. Maria.
Okay, so I'm joining you from my phone because my laptop is not my friend. We'll get that out of the way right now. So Maria Medina, I don't have a business. I just like you guys. I like learning with you all. This is actually a lovely thing for me because I am currently, I guess, in between and searching for my next career. And this is a great topic for me to take a study break from because apparently I need to brush up my skills en français parce qu'il y avait en évaluation en français plus tôt. So
wow.
That's, yeah, I need a little study break, guys. So I'm looking forward to today's presentation as well.
Well, good job. That just flowed really well. I'm impressed. Nat, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nat Rudin, a standard American accent coach and non-native speaker and an immigrant to Canada. I work with immigrants a lot who wish to improve their accent. A lot of them want to do that for the sake of getting better job opportunities. But what I see in my clients is that often it's not just the accent that is the problem. It's also the culture and understanding those hidden conversations, or I'm so sorry, I don't exactly remember what the title of this session is.
Invisible rules.
Invisible rules, exactly. Yeah. Anyhow, hidden conversation is invisible rules. That's all that matters sometimes. I feel like a lot of my clients just lose that connection with their managers and colleagues just because they don't understand those hidden rules.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you. Prasad. I think you're having mic issues, Prasad. We're going to swing back to you. Abby, long time no see, sir.
How are you, Bernie? Thank you very much, and good to see you. Hello, Nat. I think we connected at one of the events, so good to see you again. This is my first time attending a Connect Ottawa event, so happy to be here. My name is Abby, and I manage a nonprofit community hub, which was a former high school that was converted into a community hub. We have 20 nonprofits currently working out of the building, and I manage that project. And in addition to that, I have my own nonprofits called Nutrition Blocks, and we design and develop food security programs. So, yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you. Prasad, over to you if you're available, sir.
Maybe this is better.
That's working. That's working.
Great. So my name is Prasad Saraf. I'm from Kansas City area. I'm working on a pre-revenue tech startup in professional development space, and hence the invisible rules are quite attractive for me. So look forward to the discussions.
Thank you, sir. Margaret Herrer, how are you? Or
I'm great. Thank you. Sorry, I just had to unmute.
That's okay. That's okay.
We're interested in hearing what your speakers have to say. I don't think we're going to be specifically contributing, but thank you.
Hey, not a problem. Both you and James? Excellent.
Yep, we're here.
Thank you. Stefan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen John. I'm a part of the team of Connect Ottawa here. And I'm a digital ecosystem architect. So if it's possible to record and then after edit those fantastic webinars, then you can see them back on the Connect Ottawa app that you can download on your mobile device. I'm also the co-founder of the Unified Remote Workplace platform, which is a digital space for entrepreneurs to have their office online and every other software that they need to thrive in their business or for their practice. And on the other hand, I am a Lenovo business solution partner. So if you guys need to have a ramp up of your devices or updates because they are becoming too old, I'm here to help you.
Thank you, Stefan. My name is Bernie Fransroth. So one of the elements I have is Creative Insight Consultants. I B2B connections. It's more people-to-people connections, actually. I'll be posting my in the chat a little later on for any of those that arrived a little later. Feel free to put your information, your contact details in the chat, and we'll go from there. My partner in crime, unfortunately, Margaret Ann Davis. Stefan's also a partner in Connect Ottawa. She had some ocular issues that she was resolving today in a good way, so she's unable to make it today. And so Margaret Ann Davis is one of the co-founders that. In the March 2020, February 2020, where Connect Ottawa all kind of came out of nowhere. So with enough ado, I'm going to swing over and I'm going to do an intro for Paul, and we'll go from there. So he's a career consultant specializing in leadership, member engagement, and change management. He's retired from Eckler in 2016 as a senior partner and chair of the firm's global consulting network. He's been a CEO for OMERS Sponsors Corporation, a design arm for one of the Canada's leading defined benefit pension plans. And if you're not familiar with OMERS, it's the Ontario Municipal Employee Registered Savings Plans. I probably got the acronym a little screwed up, but I recognize the name. It's fairly large. Paul holds a doctorate in leadership and policy and lectures regularly on leadership. And currently he's the chair of the advisory board of Niagara University in Ontario. He also serves as an executive advisor at UPP, established joint-trusteed pension plan for the Ontario University sector. And that is the intro. And Paul, we're into our conversation next. So, Paul, what motivated you to start into this sector, into this realm of conducting a study on gender equity?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. I see some wonderfully familiar faces, and so I hope that means I'm going to get positive feedback, whether you like me or not. The rest of you can offset that with whatever responses you want. And we'll mention that Bernie and I have sort of a pseudo structure around the presentation today, but we opted not to, after 30 years of building PowerPoint presentations and making them to large groups of clients. I don't like PowerPoint anymore, and I would rather just have a discussion around these issues. So to the extent that you want to have that discussion, we're happy to move off script and to do it. So the fundamental question, it's the one I get all the time. Why does a gray-haired, we won't call it old, retired male CEO want to write a book about gender equity? And why now? And the reality is the book has been 20 years, 25 years in the making as I was a partner in various firms. But it was really motivated by my wife, who, as it turns out, is now a very senior executive. So it's a good news story at the end of the day. But what she found is in the late 90s and turn of the century is like so many women of her generation that they were sort of peaking or at least stalling at senior management levels. Well, they watched men, younger and arguably less qualified, leapfrog them into executive roles. And it was very frustrating for them, as you can imagine, and created considerable anxiety. And the fundamental question for them was why? Why am I being stalled at this level when other people are moving forward? And the reality was, that it was unfair, that many of these women ultimately opted out of organizations in the pipeline because they saw this as unfair. and many others just finally settled into senior management roles and said, I guess that's my lot in life. And the reality is those that continued on and did move it into the executive ranks, it took longer for them than it should have, and way more time and energy than it would have had they been men. And I wanted to understand why that was, why in fact women, as we look at it today, continue to only earn 10% or hold 10% of the highest paying positions in the country. And why in this day and age, after 50 years of sort of assertiveness within the environments, that women continue to be so badly underrepresented at senior leadership levels. So that was the motivation. It goes back to my wife and her experiences and her perseverance and ability to get to the place that she ultimately wanted to be without sacrificing her authenticity and herself.
Excellent. So who did you interview to do the study?
Well, the study actually began as a research paper when I was doing my PhD a few years ago as part of a career transition element. And so I just interviewed 5 senior women who were in my network. And what happened is that the feedback that I received was so remarkably consistent and rich that I said there had to be something here. So when it came time to write my thesis, I thought, let's extend this paper. Let's test whether, there was a bias around those responses, or in fact, there are some real underlying trends or rules that women face that men don't face that will impact and answer those 2 fundamental questions, which is, why do women continue to remain so dramatically underrepresented at the top of corporate Canada? And more importantly, what can we do about it? So with that, we extended, obviously, the group. We talked to 20 women, which gave us, in academic speak, saturation. So we were comfortable that we weren't going to get any additional meaningful information out of that. And I thought it would end there. So it produced this model that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, and a theory, which was the objective of the thesis around this gender inequity issue. At that point, one of my thesis advisors, I politely prompted, I'll say, heckled and cajoled me and insisted that I turn this into a book. And I did remind her that I had a full-time gig as a CEO and that might take a little extra time. And she said, well, I'll help you. So my co-author, Holly Cotlefamo, was instrumental in this. And what we did is, when we decided to make it a book, is we extended the outreach to ensure that we had geographic distribution. So we make sure that we have leadership from all of the 10 provinces. And that one of the problems with the thesis is that it did not consider inclusion to the extent that it needed to. So what we wanted to do is we expanded our perception, or our research, is that we were accepting that gender is not necessarily binary, and B, that we needed to look at this from an intersectional standpoint. So 13 of the final 50 women that we ended up, all of whom are at least by vice presidents, many CEOs and chairs of respective organizations, that we had 13 intersectional candidates, so that we could at least have some broader understanding of the demands that were created for women just outside of the gender component of the study. Sorry, that was long-winded and hardly concise, but I'll get on track shortly.
That's totally okay. So in the book, women tend to face 4 big biases that simply make it harder for them to compete. What are those biases?
Yeah. So again, one of the great things of the study is that we got this unbelievably consistent response from these women who have experienced the workplace and had managed to rise to this very senior levels. And I'm sure, as I talk about this, that most of the women here will just nod and go, yeah, really? Because you've experienced them in a day in and day out basis. The issue here is that I wrote the book as much for men as women, because what we discovered as we began to look at these biases, that the males, many of whom manage the existing infrastructure based on the patriarchy, were totally oblivious to these issues that women face on a day-to-day basis. And more importantly, we're oblivious about the roles they were playing to continue to perpetrate those biases as we move forward. So bear with me a second. I will do my best to summarize them, but they're fairly extensive. Is that we identified 4 key biases. The first is prove it again. And this is the notion that women have to outwork men on a daily basis. And they have to demonstrate their right to play based on sustained performance, where men tend to be promoted more on potential and self-promotion. And that was feedback we received, but there is data under significant studies that show that women tend to be more harshly assessed during performance reviews, and that women absolutely wear mistakes more deeply than their male colleagues, even when those perceived mistakes or underperformance was achieved or it was the result of teamwork. So this necessarily reinforces or exacerbates the socialized risk aversion that many women face in the workplace. And without risk, there tends to be no reward. So that's a key bias. The second one is called the tightrope. And this is on the basis that in our society and in corporate Canada, corporate North America, is that we continue to sort of stereotype leadership as masculine. We talk about it in terms of assertiveness, aggression, agentic qualities that are male-like. And yet we continue to stereotype women in terms of passivity in communal roles. Women are expected to be team building, empathetic, those sort of communal qualities. And the difficulty is that one necessarily precludes the other. So if you adhere to your gender role, you're expected to be communal. If you adhere too aggressively to the leadership role, then you undermine your gender role. And so the issue is women face this tension between likability in the workplace and leadership. So if you assert yourself too aggressively, you become that, we know the word. And so you will be judged as leader-like, but you will often be very unlikable within the environment. If you're too passive on a daily basis, you're likable, but you are dismissed as a potential leader. And that's a tension that men simply don't face and don't have to deal with on a daily basis. The third is a thing called the tug of war, which is the notion that women tend to judge women in the workplace, often in how they manage this tension between likability and leadership. So you have the tomboys, as it's quoted in the literature on one side, and the ladies on the other, who often have conflicting views on how they should respond in a marketplace or in a workplace as they seek to ascend the ladder. And that can become very, very difficult, very demanding, very anxious, anxiety causing. And it's this, and then the fourth one, of course, is the maternal role. So no surprise here, women tend to, disproportionate level, stay home with newborn children, which causes issues related to, re-entry to a workplace when they in fact choose to go back. If they choose to go back, it provokes or is exacerbated by sort of benevolent sexism, where when women do come back to the workplace, they're often bosses, whether they be male or female, are less likely to give them stretch assignments and opportunities to prove themselves, thinking that they should in fact be home being mothers. And this creates, and as again, extends typically beyond just the birth of children and the raising of children, but the disproportionate responsibility women have for just domestic issues, period. And so again, this is a significant bias that can be a career bender, as they say, rather than ender. It slows your ascent. And because of that, it leads to this sort of cumulative disadvantage over time, which is one of the big reasons that we see a pay gap and the significant pay gap that we do. So those become the 4 biases, and very consistent for many women. And I'm sure many of you are nodding at this point going, yep, I get it. Been there, done that, or I'm experiencing it now. Again, the issue here is it's not news for women. but it is news for men. And speaking as a proxy for all male executives everywhere, I was guilty of it. I thought I was fairly liberal. I thought I was progressive in my thinking around these issues. And yet I made every one of the mistakes that we identified in the book in terms of benevolent sexism, perceptions of what a leader was, what should be, exclusion of women from social and political networks that would have advanced their careers, all of those things. And what we're hoping in many respects is the book will open many male executives' eyes as we move forward.
Did you find that it's dependent on the industry too? That where the male perception is, I'm thinking from the healthcare perspective, considering say 80% population is female in that space, versus let's say a construction firm. Does it matter? Is it uniform across the board?
Yeah, that's one of the interesting invisible rules. So this goes back to a study that was done in the 80s about the right fit. And the reality is beyond just the male-female thing, is that we do have this bias, this perception of people's capacity to do work based on whether that work is perceived as gender specific at this time. And that you pick the two. So nursing continues to be dominated by women, right? 94% of all nurses in Ontario or Canada, I guess, are female. And the flip side is construction. The labor component of construction is male dominated. And it becomes very difficult for gender or individuals to cross that gender expectation. So going into an environment, male nurses are often perceived as less qualified, less capable, because they lack that nurturing quality that we associate with females. And in the construction site, the view is that women will necessarily be less capable because they're not as physically strong or mechanically inclined. And on an individual by individual basis, we know that's total crap. But yes, there is that whole issue of the right fit bias that people face. And that's one of the invisible rules rather than the four big biases that we identified. But it's a wonderful observation, Bert.
So in your book, there's strategies for senior female leaders to navigate these biases. What are those strategies? What works for them?
And so that was one of the questions. We asked women, the 50 leaders, to say, okay, if you have identified these biases, you obviously managed to navigate them. And as an aside, we said, what do you attribute your success? What were the strategies? And to a person, they said, well, luck. And we went, really? I said, and just the observation is that is a distinctly female response. I have yet to find a male executive who's told me that he got to his role based on luck, right? So once we started probing that and said, well, what does luck really look like? And they said, well, no, as a matter of fact, there were strategies that we adopted, which won't surprise us. There were 4 of them, and they tend to work as antidotes or countermeasures to the biases that were outlined. And we adopted this model as a result of the discussions and tested it with the group. And it's called the CAPS Leadership Framework. And CAPS is an acronym for Credentials, Adaptability, Profile, and Support. And so the women told us that as they were moving through their careers, that they identified these issues. Credentials first. So virtually every one of the women we talked to had advanced degrees and or professional designations and or ICDs. So beyond that, the issue, and this just comes down to an issue of the prove it again, is that credentials give women instant credibility and, more importantly, a voice at the table, this expert power. So you're far likely to have a voice at the table if someone's inviting you to that table to provide your expertise. So the credentials become essential as an awareness builder and a credibility builder. And more importantly is once you have that expert power and are recognized for it, it tends to lead to stretch opportunities. So you now get opportunities to apply this, more importantly, so that you can demonstrate business performance beyond just your credentials. That was number 1. Adaptability relates to the tightrope, and it is an ability, learned or innate, to walk that line between assertiveness and community. So to know when to bark, when to bite, and when to back off, as one of the groups said. So again, tension that men don't have to deal with, but women need to walk that line between that likability in a situation and a willingness to assert themselves as appropriate. And, you know, a big one, and an extension of that, take risks. You know, we had the great story of one of our leaders who told us that she was about to post just posted two job opportunities at an executive level based on a restructuring. And she tells us within 6 minutes, and she says that she knows it's 6 minutes because she checked her watch, 3 men showed up at her door to say, I'm in. One of whom was offended that he even had to apply for it. He should have just been given the job. And the women duly wrote nice emails to understand more broadly what the expectations were, what they were looking for in terms of the individual, and will I be considered, and all of those wonderful things. And there's good and valid reasons for it. We know this goes back to risk aversion. We know it goes back to a socialized realization that I'm probably not going to get the job anyway. So why am I going to spend my time wasting my time applying for it and being, you know, disappointed with the outcomes based on past experience? But there is this notion that women do have to assert themselves more aggressively from time to time, not necessarily on a sustained basis. The third is profile. It's this notion that women have to overcome this socialized tendency to keep their heads down, to work hard and hope somebody will notice. It doesn't work, right? So you have to build a profile and make people aware of who you are. People can't promote women or individuals that they don't know. So it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. It can be a tremendous success. You know, Ava's in the consulting world, bring in a big client and suddenly everyone knows who you are. But you can do it on a departmental basis, then on an organizational basis, an industry basis, and ultimately maybe a cultural basis. But as you build that profile, success leads to success, and more importantly, it will help you attract sponsors. And we'll talk about that one in a minute. And then the last one beyond the profile is support, is that there was a recognition that women still want to do it all. They feel obligated, socialized to be perfect in everything. And the reality is, if you want to get to the top, you can't do it on your own. Men haven't. Men have always had their spouses helping them. So women largely need to accept that they can't do it all on their own all the time, which is anxiety causing in many cases. But there is this need for support, and it's organizational support. Join a company that believes in gender equity and will support you. It's family support. Ideally, you have a spouse or a partner or someone who's meaningful in your life who will help you get where you need to be. It's no surprise that most of the women we talked to had spouses that were either stay at home, so they had put their lot in with their spouse to get them to the top, had more flexibility than the spouse, the female who was trying to achieve their outcomes, so that they could spend the time picking up the kids and making the appointments and at least sharing in that stuff, or were of equal level. So they understood the demands that were being placed on their spouse as they were seeking leadership positions, so were more inclined to share that burden. Those who didn't have a spouse who was one of those three things typically had an ex-spouse. So that's something to bear in mind. And then the last one is sponsorship. And this is not mentorship. So sponsorship is actually attracting someone who takes a personal and professional interest in your career success. And there's a great line that says, people don't climb the corporate ladder. They're dragged up it by the scruff of the neck by people who believe in them. And so this finding a sponsor becomes key as that last bit of the CAPS model. And your ability to attract that sponsor typically is a byproduct of your credentials, your adaptability, and your profile internally. So it's sort of this nice little progressive element that gets the CAPS model. So those were the sort of key strategies that the women had outlined, our female leaders, as essential for women who are aspiring to leadership roles.
Okay, I'll just take a second to see if anybody has any questions for you, Paul. Any questions or comments? And as I'm scanning the horizon of our guests, I don't. Oh, Danielle, go ahead.
I was just thinking about how you mentioned that the lady you were talking about who put up a job opening and she had three men knocking at her door. I wonder if that's also because women, as we grow up, we're constantly told be polite, be nice, be considerate of others. We're told to make ourselves very docile and likable, and so we're not likely to do things that would be considered abrupt or borderline aggressively rude, as it would be to just show up and start saying, hire me. We're more likely to send a nice letter.
Yeah, and we talk about that in the book from minute one. Like the genders, the sort of stereotypical gender norms are socialized on the playground, right? Like from the time you're very young people. And I know that there are cultural elements too. Different cultures are more aggressive. Other cultures are socialized to stay back. But yeah, it's absolutely true. And that's one of the things that women have to overcome. And I'm glad you raised this, because this book is not a how-to for women. That's not why we wrote it. Women know what they face, and they largely know what they have to do to overcome these elements. And the reality is, if women could have fixed the situation, it would have been fixed all by themselves. It would have been fixed a very long time ago. This is more about men changing their knowledge base, attitudes, and perceptions at a leadership level than it is women changing what they do. But it was just one of those notions where there is this point at which you have to raise your hands. So Isabel Houdon is great. So I don't know if you know who, when we were interviewing her for the book, she's ex-Sun Life exec. She was the ambassador to France for Canada and invited me to Paris for breakfast. And I was going to go to talk to her in Paris for breakfast just as our friend, the pandemic hit. But she has this great line about, whenever she wants to fill a board role and she's going to phone a woman, she knows she has to have a good night's sleep, get her exercise, take her vitamins, and make sure her energy is up, because it's going to be an hour-long conversation about, are you sure I'm the right person? Am I good enough? What are the demands? How will I fit? And she said, if I phone a man for a board position, he has two questions: when and where. Right. So it is that socialized difference. And so women don't need to necessarily become men. Hopefully you don't. But just to take that page out is to take the risk and to assert yourself more aggressively on that situational basis. If it's something you want, you have to tell people you want it, or they won't know you want it. And that was part of the mistakes I made, was sitting at a partner's table and going around all the candidates. And we actually said, this guy says he wants to be a partner. This woman, she's a great performer, but she hasn't said anything, so I guess it's not important. And that's on us, that we did it wrong. We should have gone and asked the question, are you interested, given your performance, in being a partner? But it would have just been helpful, until people change their mindsets at that leadership table, to have someone just say, I'd really love to be a partner of this firm. What will it take? And so it's just those small dynamics, not about compromising your authenticity or your knowledge, but just understanding how some of those elements work and just being a little bit more assertive on a situational basis. Does that probably answers 40 questions, none of which was the one you asked, but hopefully it was a little insightful.
If there are no other questions, go ahead, Nat.
Paul, thank you so much for the great input. And I actually wanted to ask a question from a different perspective. So I think you covered the point of not being assertive enough as a factor that prevents women from progressing in their career. What if a woman is not likable enough? Because you said they're supposed to tread on thin ice and kind of leverage and balance out their ability to be liked with their assertiveness. What if a woman just, goes full way and is completely assertive and confident and doesn't care about anyone's feelings? What is the potential consequence or the price an average woman pays for such behavior?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's the part of the problem with the tightrope. It is a tightrope, right? You have to walk this relatively fine line between these two things. So the data tell us that if women are highly assertive, they will be viewed as very leader-like from a quality perspective, but are likely to pay a penalty from a likability perspective. So they'll get to the top, but they'll be delayed based on this overly aggressive stance. That also leads us to this notion of the queen bee, right? Which is this women who ultimately make it to the top of the house, and in so doing, sort of push back other women from getting to that position rather than helping to lift them up. And in many respects, that's not a condemnation of the woman. It's a condemnation or a byproduct of a very unhealthy, almost toxic work environment. So the woman has responded to a notion that there are only 2 or 3 seats available at the table for a woman. So if you want it, you necessarily have to adopt the leadership perspectives that are predominant within the organization. So you basically have to become a man and separate yourselves from the women who are seeking that same sort of role. It becomes a competitive advantage. It's very Darwinian from that perspective, right? So to your point, if you're too aggressive, there's a potential penalty there, which is the tension that women face. Yeah.
Okay, but still, it sounds like, based on what you said, it's better to be assertive and cruel for a woman to progress in their career than being likable. Sounds like it. I don't know.
Well,
that's
no,
what you said, or maybe I heard it wrong.
No, I think what happens there though is yes, if the sole ambition is to get to the top of the house, then be as aggressive as possible. The difficulty there is for most women that becomes highly inauthentic and will become toxic to them on an individual basis ultimately. So they end up selling their souls, which is not what you want, right? And again, that's why it's essential that it's the men who begin to understand the biases that women face and the actions that those men take that are detrimental to the advancement of women, whether they're well-intentioned or not. And hopefully that's where we get. So I hope that clarifies if all that matters to you in life is to be Donald Trump, be Donald Trump. God forbid there be 2 of them. So stay authentic throughout, and that becomes part of the discussion and part of the anxiety that so many women deal with. And that's why so many women just self-select out of corporate pipelines and say, I'm not putting up with this crap. And they go off and start their own businesses or join not-for-profits or alternative workplaces. By the way, 3 or 4 of our most senior women in the book, people like Christine McGee, were that woman. She said, I'm not doing it. She was on her way up in the banking industry, but she was not comfortable with what they were asking her to do to get to that senior level that had been promised to her. And she said, no, I'm going to go start this funny little mattress company. Maybe it'll do okay. So there is that whole issue of what feels right for you within the context in which you're operating. Okay.
We have a couple more questions, and just folks, so you have a heads up at 5 minutes to 2. Paul has to beetle out of our session, so we have a 10-minute window. And over to you, Tanya.
So Paul, thanks a lot for this presentation. As you said, I think a lot of women know this stuff, but I think other communities might know some of them too. Yesterday, I watched the Nav Bhatia story, who is the Raptors superfan. Yep. And he said something in there that I remember being said by a commentator on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which was 1962 or something like this, where the underling, in that case, the immigrant, has to be absolutely perfect. You have to demonstrate 3 times what anybody else does. And so like women have had to do this for a long time, but I'm just wondering if there's any associations that you made to other communities who have some of this as well.
Yeah, so that was a fundamental question. And so to start with, I actually really wanted to do my thesis on inclusion. I wanted to go beyond gender equity. Gender equity is just one small part, an essential part, but of the broader discussion. And I was advised, and I think positively so by my advisors, that if you do a thesis on inclusion, I'd still be writing it and I'd be on volume 5, right? It's so nuanced and so extensive. So focus on gender equity on the basis that if you can't get gender equity right, how can you really plan to get inclusion right? But what we did want to talk to and to involve intersectional candidates, some very, very senior people. Zabine Herji was one of the key folks in the book, and many of you might have heard of Zabine. But we asked her, were there fundamentally different biases that people of color or intersectional candidates had that went beyond the 4 that we really identified? And the answers were two intriguing. One is that no, there aren't specifically more biases, but they become amplified every time you add a qualifier. So if you're a woman, or you're a Black woman, or you're an Indigenous woman, or you're a disabled Indigenous woman, and every time you did that, you had to prove yourself more. You had to do all of these things on a far more acute basis. The other thing that we got when people started reading it is I had the CFO of a very large manufacturer in Ontario is a man who read this, and he phoned me about 11 o'clock at night to say, Paul, I just finished your book. I think I'm a woman. Because he, as an immigrant, had experienced the same biases in many respects beyond the maternal wall. So what we begin to see is that the minute you are not a white male, the biases occur. And the further you get away in a world where like hires likes, like sponsors like promotes like, the further you get away from like, the more acute the biases become. So and gender is just then one of the qualifiers that we were looking at as you begin to look at intersectionality. Does that help? So yes, I agree with you entirely that this is just one small part of the element. And to your point, I still remember one of my professors talking about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, as groundbreaking as it was, that the Sidney Poitier character was essentially a step removed from a Nobel Prize. Right? The guy's perfect. He's taking medical whatever into, and he was dressed more, totally in an offensive potential discussion. But the view was that the Sidney Poitier was the whitest guy in the movie from the stereotypical view of what this needed to be. And so, yeah, he had to be. Society wasn't ready for it, which is an incredibly disturbing commentary, right? So yeah, thank you for the comment.
Akina has a question also. Go ahead, Akina.
Thank you, Bernie. And thank you, Paul, for your presentation. I am currently sort of just coming out of a situation where I worked with a team of all men. I was the only woman, and further, I was the only Black woman. And I found it the only Black person. Let me rephrase that. Yes. And I found that it was just increasingly and exceedingly difficult to navigate the space. And I wonder if you have tips for people who are living in those intersections, women who are living in within those varied intersections, to sort of navigate these spaces, because I mean, once you're done, you're so traumatized from, you're getting it left and right, and you're so traumatized from everything that you're experiencing that there's just almost nowhere to go. Yeah, and I'm just curious about your take on this from the lens of being likable. So, in this space, I'm Black, I'm female, and so that asserts like certain assumptions about me, right? I'm aggressive. I am too assertive when I shouldn't be. I'm certainly not likable because I don't fall in any of the range around what is likable for the status quo, which in most cases is attractability politics, right?
Mhm.
And so it makes it really difficult when you're just trying to earn a living.
Yeah. Yeah, from pet to threat, right? Is
Yes.
yeah. So I have no expertise that I can offer in this area. In fact, writing the book opened my eyes, and there's some just brilliant women that I continue to have the dialogue with, because I simply didn't understand how I don't even know what the word is, but just how difficult a time that women, to start with, but largely, Black, Indigenous, and women of color have it, and especially as you move away from this. So there are 3 women specifically in the book that we talked to, and Michelle Bannock, who's brilliant. She's now sits on the board of Empire Group, Sobeys Companies, and others, who's just helped me greatly understand the demands. And so we've partnered on some significant presentations and discussions. And a woman named Camille Orridge, who was a CEO of one of the LINs and is now a senior fellow at the Wellesley Institute. And she says, she says, Paul, I'm very Black, I'm very Jamaican, and I'm very gay. It makes life tough. Even though she's been, she's had success, moved to a CEO level, but she said just the exhaustion and the amount of work that was required to get there on a day-to-day basis, and the impact that that's had on her longer term have just been horrendous. So I can't personally reasonably speak with any kind of expertise or clarity around these issues. In fact, I would love to have a conversation with you outside of this at some point, where you can help me again better understand the impacts and the needs and the expectations, and hopefully I can help elevate that understanding within the male patriarchy that I've made my living in, is to help build awareness and appreciation for the demands that are being placed on people who don't fit comfortably within the standard perceptions of what a male white leader looks like, right? So I'm sorry, I don't have good, other than what's in the book, which is some fairly compelling, lots of quotes and lots of stories from the senior leaders. But on a personal level, I can't speak knowledgeably about that.
So we have one other last question from Anna.
Yeah,
It's got to be short because we're at 5 minutes to the hour. So Anna, go for it. Oh, Anna.
Put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat.
I think Linda had a comment or question as well, too, right?
Linda, did you have a...
I just sent Paul the same note I sent you, Bernie. I do a talk that's really popular, particularly in my target market of organizations that are male dominated, but now they have women's councils to bring more women to it. It's called the 3 Keys to Juicy, Effective Conversations Between Women and Men.
That's great. We are, by the way, I've with my colleague Holly have been running, there is interest. So we've been running groups with the employee resource groups, largely around gender and broader inclusion. We've done them some fairly large organizations, and we just had a 2-hour workshop with the CEO and his direct reports at Green Shield Canada. So there is real interest on helping old white men understand from other old white men how they can change and how they need to change. Because the quick thing, what I didn't talk about, we didn't get to the book, is that, so then we finally said, okay, you've got all these issues. What are the answers? What can you do organizationally? And sure, there's all these issues around progressive leadership or HR practices and management practices. But what it really comes down to is leadership first. This is not a bottom-up issue. This is a top-down issue. And unless you have a board and a C-suite that is diverse and committed to diversity, you will not have an organization that is diverse and committed to diversity. And then 3 other things is fix pay. Pay is an easy one. So you can do that. Anyone can sit down with a spreadsheet and determine who's overpaid and underpaid and what the break is on gender. Just raise the pay. It's a 15% hit to the organization max. The second is de-bias and make promotion practices more progressive. So even people who aren't getting the job then have follow-ups to their promotional opportunities so that they understand that they are valued members of the organization and they are now in line for an advancement. And the third one is flexibility without guilt. And now that's been helped a little bit with the pandemic, but the issue is if you trust people to do their jobs and they do it well, let them do it when they do it, where they do it, and how they do it. Don't ask them to clock in, don't ask them to clock out. If they got to go hang out with their children, they want to go see a play, they want to go, enjoy it. But make sure that these are presented as employee programs and not as accommodation to women who need extra time. Make sure the fathers are using those things as well. So that's the quick response. Anna, you still.
Paul,
I think you put it in there.
You've got 2 minutes, man, and you gotta bail out of here.
Yeah, communication. We need to be able to communicate and talk to each other. If we're not even using the right language, I can't tell you how many times I was called sweetie at the Department of Justice when Kim Campbell was the minister.
Well, if it was from Kim, she could get away with it, but anyone else, no.
That's
so
right.
I think I really do have to run. I would have loved to sit and talk further. I have a meeting that I can't blow off, but I hope this was of interest, helpful. If anyone wants to follow up, Bernie knows where to find me. Always happy to have the conversations, and I thank you very much for spending your valuable time with me today. And
Paul,
I look forward to
Paul,
future discussion.
Appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, got to run.
So, folks, this is a quick recap of other things. We have a Thursday core VIP session coming up. The promo code's 2021 Explore, all uppercase letters. And next Tuesday, Connect Ottawa is upgrading some of the services we're offering. And Stefan and Margaret Ann will be presenting on that. 5 minutes after, depending how fast I get into that email, I will populate your email addresses in there. So if I have your email address, other important thing is save the chat. Bottom right hand corner, the 3 dots. That way you retain what's been shared. Folks, thank you so much. And hey, not bad. Half a second just before 2. That's not bad. Because I can talk. Any comments? Anything else? Life's good. Anna, good luck with the mic.
Thank you so much for everything. Thank you, Bernie.
Daniel, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Bonnie. It was a great session.
Thank you, Brenda. Glad you enjoyed it. And you can take us off live stream there, Stefan.
Sure.